2. All right. All right, welcome. My name is Mike Kelly, and I'm the one of the forum admins for Animators Forum, and that's probably where you're seeing this. This is part 2 of my workflow. I'm going to hopefully show you exactly how my workflow goes, continuing from what I did last time. What I did last time was to show you how the specialized tools work with the Shuttle Pro. Today, I'm going to try to go through and pick up all the little bits and pieces of how I actually do what little I do, and hopefully it will help you out. And specifically, we're going to concentrate on, I'm working on another song from Forum called My Bride, and I'm going to show you how I take a typical song and animate it in not the whole thing, of course, just enough of it to show you my workflow here. And along the way, we're going to see all kinds of things, and hopefully I will not miss anything. I haven't I haven't completely tried this demo out on this particular machine, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, so here we go. First off, we're going to use Papagayo, as we have talked about in the past, and I think I have a tutorial already on how to use Papagayo, but I'm going to go over a couple more things with it and a couple bullet points that are important. I don't think there's any better way to do lip sync in any program than Papagayo, and that's high praise indeed, because I've looked at a lot of different ways of doing lip sync, including some very expensive things to try to do lip sync in. And Magpie used to be the best prior to Papagayo, but it's an amazing program. And if Mike did nothing more than write this program, Mike Clifton, the author of Anime Studio, if this is all he wrote, then he would be in the pantheon of animation software writers, but he obviously has done a lot more. So, Papagayo. And typically what happens when I'm doing a scene, I'm going to speak to my workflow, and that doesn't mean that you guys can't do it differently. This is just my workflow, what works for me, and if you don't like it, then do it your own way. But for me, typically I need to break the audio files into smaller segments for a number of reasons. First of all, it's much harder to work with a long audio file, not only in Papagayo, but in Anime Studio. And secondly, it's not a good practice to have long scenes. And by breaking into multiple scenes, it kind of forces you to do more camera change. And although you can do camera changing, and we're going to show that too, even in one single scene, by breaking into multiple scenes, it tends to focus you in that direction. But more importantly, in Papagayo, if you do something that's longer than about 30 seconds, longer than about a minute basically, you're going to run into all kinds of issues. It's just harder to drag the text over. It gets very sluggish even on a fast machine. It's just very difficult to work with. So you want to keep your files smaller if possible. And so here's a good example of that. What I've done is the song itself, of course, is 3 or 4 minutes long. And I've gone into an audio program. I use SoundForge, but you can use a lot of different programs. And I've just split it into multiple audio files and use that with just cut at logical stopping points. Now, obviously, they're not complete silences on those cuts, but because I've cut cleanly from one cut to the next, when I then match them up, as we'll show you, the audio will flow as if they are not cut at all. And that's actually how we'll work with them also in Anime Studio. So in this particular case, I've loaded in the number 1 file, the audio file, and here it is. And if we play it, you'll hear it. I may have to turn it up a little bit.
My bride, I've come to claim my bride. Come tenderly to crush her against my side.
Okay, so that's the file that I'm working with, and it goes up to this very end sequence. It just stops here at this sequence here. Well, I guess it doesn't, because you have to play it all the way through. All right, so we'll play it all the way through.
My bride, I've come to claim my bride. Come tenderly to crush her against my side. Let haste be made, I cannot be delayed. There are lands to conquer, cities to loot, and people to degrade.
And see, it just stops there. the audio continues in the second segment. So I've loaded in this first segment in here, done all the words in Papagayo. I'm not going to go through doing all that. And then I stretched out the phrases here over this segment. So where he says, my bride, he says it right there. And then what you have to do after you stretch out the segment is you then stretch out the words within that segment. So you see he says it about that. That's about what he says here. But the last part of Papagayo that, and unfortunately I didn't really cover this in my tutorial on Papagayo. I kind of glossed over this, primarily because I didn't want to get too complicated there. But you also need to line up the phonemes, and phonemes are the segments of sound that make up words. So in this particular case, the word my has two phonemes. It has this MBP phoneme, this sound if you put your lips together, and it has the AI, which is I, my. So as he says that word, as you see, if I drag this over, you'll see that the phoneme actually doesn't match up exactly right. See, he starts to say the AI right here, if you can hear that on the audio. So the routine that sets up these words just kind of spaces out these phonemes. It doesn't attempt to do any reasoning as to where the phonemes would be, and nor could it, because everybody speaks differently. You might drawl and stretch out a word differently. So in this particular case, I just have to drag this AI phoneme to line up where, there, and if you can notice here, this mouth representation kind of shows you how he's talking. Notice how that looks a lot better. So you're going to want to drag the phonemes and make them match up. See, here's another one where he's already saying AI here, but these syllables are woefully. And then he says D there. So see how that works? Looks a lot better. So we need to move those syllables, those phonemes. And one thing about lip sync we always talk about is always better to be early than late. Now, logically speaking, you don't want to be either one, but you never want to be late, or you get into the old Japanese movie badly dubbed syndrome, where and I'll show you, if we were to move, for example, bride further, and you watch the mouth here, and it goes. See, obviously, looks like bad lip sync. So you always want to be at least on time or early. It's always, and the reason for that is, you can think about this, is if somebody starts talking, they start saying the AI word, they might open their mouth before the sound actually comes out, but hardly ever keep their mouths closed when the sound keeps coming out, unless they're very skilled ventriloquists. So early than late. Always think about that. So if you start to hear the AI sound, or whatever the sound is of their opening mouth, make sure you shove that phoneme up there. And on that same note, it's nearly always the vowel sounds that you're going to need to adjust. There are you're going to want to adjust the R's to a large degree, and L's, FV, of course, the sound, but the vowels are where people drag things out and draw things out. So like here, so he starts my right there, so you need to move that AI up to there. So it's just basically a matter of adjusting. So you're going to adjust the words first, adjust the phonemes, and then you're set. And it's not hard. It is tedious. I won't pretend otherwise. My wife, my lovely bride, helps me out greatly by doing a lot of this tedious work. I still end up adjusting the phonemes, but she adjusts all the words for it. But it's not fun. It's not the fun part of animation. There's no creative part of this. You really have to do this by the numbers. But the good news is it does go fast, and particularly if you work with smaller segments, it's not terrible. So once you're done with all the segments, then you are set to go. Oh, and on that subject too, while we're there, let me load in the second one here. I'm not going to save that change. I'm going to load in the second segment, one that's already done. This is like those cooking shows where they have the things already done. And here I'm going to play this file. Hopefully you can listen to this. I'll turn it up a little bit if it's so we can hear it. I want you to listen to this. This is the second segment of this song.
Look at the fun, look at that check, look at that. Not to mention the rest. Even I am impressed.
So hopefully you've noticed that there's more than one person talking here. Papagayo has the ability to put new voices in the list. For example, you can go down here and add another voice and then type in words for that segment. So you actually have two separate segments. For example, if I go new here, you notice that there's no words there, and then I could type in words, whatever the words are. I don't really remember. But so they would be there, and then I would go to voice 1, and they would have those words. I don't ever do this anymore. I used to do this, and this made life really complicated. The reason it makes it complicated is when you're putting in the words here, you have to stretch out the words over all the audio. If you have 2 or 3 people talking, or even just 2 people talking, you're going to have to do a lot of stretching and a lot of backfilling, and it's just a big pain. The only time I ever do this, where I add a separate voice, is if 2 people are talking over each other. In my show, because the words are written by the wonderful writer that writes our show, are so important, people do not talk over each other, or at least we try not to have them talk over each other. There's even ways you can get around that, even by using one person, but in general, what we do is I just put all the same voices here. So here you have people talking, and these people say, look at the arms, look at the chest, and then he says, not to mention the rest. I'm sorry, the lead singer, not to mention the rest. These are his minions that are saying these things. I just have it as one big file. I'm going to show you how we use one big file to switch among that, and it just simplifies life. When we were doing it with multiple files, it was just so much more complicated, and I just don't see any reason for it. So that's the way I work. Once again, you can work any way you want. But these are all adjusted. So let's assume that we've all done all these magical, wonderful things. As my cat jumps into here. Yeah, you're going to talk. She's making a special guest appearance. And now we're going to go to the scene. So here we are in the sequence, and I'm actually going to show you now how we handle this. This is Milos, the lead singer in this song, and you can see that by if I do this.
My bride.
Now he's not singing yet. The reason is I have to load his mouth into to Milos. And those of you that watched the first tutorial, if you didn't, or not tutorial, I guess, video explanation, I guess is the best thing to say. If you didn't, hopefully you will, because you need to see how some of the tools work with this. But essentially, I can select my character using this tool, and then I can go to the mouths, and it selects the mouths that I'm going to load in on there. I'm actually going to bring the layers and show you something on how these... normally I have the layers hidden. I don't work with the layers at all. But I'm going to show you how Milos is constructed because I want you to see... here's his head. So if you see, here's his head, and I break down his head, break up his head. And here's the mouth. And the mouth is a main group, a switch. And then within this switch are other switches. So I have a neutral switch group. I have an angry switch group, I have a happy switch group, and then I have these other expressions that are not talking expressions. So within, for example, the neutral switch group, I have all the phonemes that you're probably used to seeing, and they're all done in a neutral manner so that the facial expression is neutral. Here under angry, they're all done in an angry manner. So, for example, if I were to switch to angry, you could see that his expression here, well, it's going to be hard to see when it's selected like that. Let me zoom in. And we go to, let's say, that. And I wish it hadn't selected all the things in here, but there, you can see his mouth is kind of downturned in there. And the rest position is angry. So that's angry. And then if he's in the happy position, we go to that position, we select the happy. He then on his mouth positions, you can see may not be able to see, but he's actually smiling in those positions. So we have 3 different ways that he can be talking: neutral, angry, happy, and then he has all these other expressions that he can make when he's not talking. So those are the mouth expressions. So what I would do, for those of you that are familiar with how Papagayo works, is for these switch layers, I would have to go in to switch and then select my audio source, which is going to be the data file, so the switch data file for each of those. And I can do that. I go in there and here the switch the data file, and My Bride number 2 is the first data file, and I say okay. And now I've loaded that into neutral, and so now if I have neutral select,
My bride.
So he speaks as neutral speaks. And I have to do that for angry and happy as well, which I will do, except that I also have a script that does all this. So I don't even have to worry about the layer or the mouth positions, of course, because I'm so lazy, I automate everything. So my script basically, once the character is selected, I just say load mouths. And then the same thing, it points it towards the data file, which in this particular case is the data2 file, and just loads it in for all the mouths that are part of that. So that's just my shortcut to deal with that. So now I'm going to drag my layers out of there. So now the mouths are all loaded in, and the only thing I have to do now is set the position for the mouths. Well, when he first starts talking, when he first sits here, he's probably just resting happy. I don't want him to actually say anything yet. And matter of fact, I'm going to drag the timeline over so you can see. So that's set a key here. So now as he talks, now he starts talking here. That's where I'm going to change it to happy. So now, as it goes here,
My bride.
So that's how I can adjust him as he's actually talking, and that's also how I can make him, even within the middle of him talking, change expression. So I'll show you one of those.
My bride, my bride.
Now, I normally wouldn't do this. I wouldn't have him change expression while he does that, but I want to show you can't. He's happy with what he says. But now the second time he says my bride, I'm going to make him angry. That would be very weird, but he's kind of schizo maybe. So notice the first thing goes,
My bride, my bride.
notice how he changed happy and sad. So even within the course,
My bride, my bride.
I can even have him change in the middle of a word if I want. And the nice thing about this is that I can get a variety of expressions by just changing back and forth between happy and angry and neutral, just in the mouth expressions. When he's not talking, I can have him rest, so he's not saying anything. And that's also how I deal with multiple characters, which I'll show you in a second about that. So that's essentially how I deal with the mouth and loading those in. So now let's assume, once again, this is like a cooking show. Let's assume now I've gone through and done all of the. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you too. Let me show you this. One of my other things about workflow. I have a lot of things about workflow, but I got the character selected. If I go to Bones too, I didn't show you this the other day. Let me back out. One of the other things I have with Bones is not just the ability to, using my Swiss Army tool, to rotate and do things with Bones, but I also have the ability to load in different things. So for example, if I wanted to load in the kick down stage leg, and then that way, now he has a kick. I don't know why you would want to do that, but this is my way of getting around doing actions. I can load and save bone animations, and when I save them, then I can apply them to any character, which is kind of nice because these animations are generalized enough that, and I can edit them and you know, kind of make them more useful. And if I come up with a new animation, then I can save it out as a bone animation. It will automatically load in here. So that's just one more tool that I have to animate things and to make life simpler for me, because that's really what it's all about, is making life easier and making me able to enable my animation ideas. So anyway, speaking of which, so now let's assume that we've done all of this on this first segment, and so sure enough, I'm going to load in, if I can. I'm going to open, not save this version, but I'm going to open the final version of that segment, because I want to show you one more thing. Actually, I'll show you a couple things about this. So this is what I ended up with, right? No, this is, yeah, this is it. Yeah.
My bride, my bride, my bride, I've come to claim my bride.
And I'm going to show you the finished animation. I'm going to post the thing, but let's just assume that we the whole finished animation. Now, remember, this is only part one of the sequence. We actually have two sequences. The first thing I wanted to show you is that we within this sequence, we do have some camera changes. Here, of course, we do a camera hold here, and then we do a zoom in slowly on him. But also, we preserve the camera here, and then we switch back to that position. So that's a common way, and I'm sure you've seen this before, but I just want to make sure you're clear on this. I'm doing a hold key on the current camera position, and then when I move forward one frame, I'm then doing new camera position. So it's just as if the camera cut to that new camera position. So that's a way that you can have camera changes within your scene, so it looks like you're using multiple cameras even in your sequence. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that, but I did want to show you that because it's not just breaking this up into scenes. The second thing is, as we reach the end of this sequence, I'm going to come to the end here, and we go, as my cat coughs, come to the end here, and, whoops, oh, that's right. I reach the end of this scene, and remember, as I reach the end of this scene, I'm going to put the same sequence. I'm going to start my new sequence with my new sound right at the end of this scene. The difficulty with that is I've done a lot of bone animation and done a lot of things already here and changed his expression. And when I load up on my brand new scene, I want him to, at the starting frame, to have the same expression, right? Are you with me so far? And all the people around? And there is an ability in here to go to animation, and you can do copy the current frame. And I could copy this current frame to frame 0, but then I would also have to erase all of the other keys that are in here. And there's a whole bunch of keys in here, and it's really a dry. Well, so okay. The long story. Long story short is I've got a script. Yes, indeed. That if I run this, it clears the animation for the scene. So as long as I've got Milos selected, which I have made sure, and I've got Milos selected. And the reason for that is I can clear the animation from the scene for each particular character. So I might want to keep some animation of the character. So now I've erased all the animation from this scene. And you'll notice if I start back at the beginning of this scene.
My pride.
Now the only thing that isn't cleared is his mouth. And the reason for that is I'm going to load in new mouths anyway. So I don't really care. So on my new sequence, when I start this, I'm going to go to Milos, which I have Milos selected here now. And I'm going to go to script, and I'm going to load mouth and load in the second data file, which is this one here. And then I'm going to come back to layers, one of the few times I actually have to go to layers, and delete the wave file there, and then load in the second audio file, which is my Bright 3. So now I have a brand new audio file, and you'll see when I get here.
Look at those arms, look at that chest, look at that not to mention the wrist.
Now, notice he's speaking for everybody. That's because, remember, we used the one DAT file, the one audio file for all of them. Well, in this particular case, what I like to do, this is the start of the new scene. There's no animation except for the mouths at this point in time. So what I want to do is I'm going to change the camera position so that I can see his minions. Move over here to his minions and zoom in on them. And now I want them to all speak. So because of that, and I want to go to get the layers back here. I go to one of the soldiers, and actually I don't need to do that, but I wanted to show you I can just select him directly, but I wanted to show you and I also need to get the timeline, because I brought the timeline back, so I want to show you how that works too. So I've got the soldier 4 selected, and then I go to the mouth, and now he's going to talk at that point, so he's going to be happy maybe. And the same thing goes for all the rest of these guys. I'm going to have to do this. I thought originally I would take one and then just copy it over and over again and have them do exactly the same thing. But then I thought it was a little funnier if some of them had slightly different reactions. So I do have slightly different reactions. When you see the final video, you'll see. But now they're all talking. So now if they go, whoops, except they're not. Oh, I did rest happy, didn't I? Yeah. Happy and yes. And now I've got to load in for each of these characters. I have to load in the mouths. So I load that for the third one. And again, scripts, load mouths, load all the mouths for the happy. And scripts. Yeah, man. It's a little sluggish when it's running the capture software as well. And scripts, load mouse. Okay. So now they're all talking together. Now, when he starts talking, they stop talking. What I would do then with each of them, again, is then change their mouths so they're simply resting. Rest happy, because whatever their last visual reference, in this case if they were talking happy, then I want them to rest happy, because that's the natural transition from talking happy. Obviously, you wouldn't want them to suddenly go from a rest angry once they were happy talking. So now, if I go, and then he talks. So once again, I come over to Milos, and I'd want to change the camera position anyway there. So, but I would then change his mouth position. Okay, so that's how I deal with multiple characters in the file. And it really isn't. I mean, I've got 5 characters in this file. I think you can see, even with 5, it's easy to manage back and forth while I'm changing, particularly these tools. Okay, so that's all that. So now, assuming that we've done all this, just like those cooking shows where everything is done, we're going to now come to the last part of it, which is in my editor. I'm going to bring up the rendered files for those 2 things. And first of all, I bring up the audio files. And here I'm going to insert the files in the timeline. There's a slight problem with, this is not my primary editing machine. My primary editing machine, I upgraded Premiere Pro to 5.5. This is 2.2. Unfortunately, when I bought the 5.5 version, it only runs in 64-bit. This is 32-bit, so I can't even run my new version in this one. But there's a slight, I don't know if I would call it a bug. It's just a limitation in that this won't do 30-frame non-drop code. It insists upon doing 29.97 drop code, which means, if you'll see this, if I zoom right in, there's a slight frame difference between those. Now, the audio still sounds okay. If you listen to the audio, it doesn't sound as if there's a jump there, probably because it's only a dropped frame.
I cannot be delayed. There are lands to conquer, cities to loot, and people to degrade.
And there's a tiny little bit of hesitation. On my other editor, I can put these right up together, and there's no problem. There's no limitation. One of the other things you can do is, after you've put in the multiple files here, you can actually drag over your uncut audio that stretches out over here. And you might say, well, then why am I dragging these to begin with? Well, these are going to be your guides to how long your video goes. Because in the animation, you might not have hit it exactly. You might have hit it, hopefully, at least as long, but maybe longer. And so what we're going to do is use that to line that up. So I'm going to bring in the animation. This is going to show you the other thing about importing. Every editor that I've ever worked with allows you to import sequences. And you always want to export from your Anime Studio. You want to export BMP files or possibly TGA files, but you don't want to export like a MPEG or a MOV file. You never want to export ever export a compressed file to edit, because that's just, you're compressing the compression. So you don't want to do that. So you want to export in as pristine a fashion as possible, and then in your editor, you're going to go ahead and create your final sequences there. So export as single images, and the other advantage of exporting as single images is that if you need to re-render maybe only a handful, you might only need to re-render 10 or 20 of them because you just change a little sequence here and there. You can just do that over, so you don't have to re-render the whole thing, and that makes a difference in HD particularly. So these are all HD files. And I'm going to search in here. So the way to do this in Premiere Pro, and every editor does it differently, but instead of a single still, I'm going to tell it's numbered still. And what that means is it's going to import this as a sequence, and it knows, for example, that the media starts here and goes 634 frames. And then I'm going to also import the second sequence, because there's 2 sequences here. And it's a little sluggish on this machine. Once again, this is not my fastest machine by any means. Oops, and there's the second sequence. There it is, and it is also numbered still. So there's my 2 sequences, and so when I'm going to take this sequence here, the first sequence, and I'm going to put it right down there, And if I come down to where the very end of it here and then zoom in a little bit so you can see where it ends, you'll notice that it goes beyond that wave file or that audio file. So I'm going to just move it and essentially trim it back so it fits exactly right with that audio. And then the same thing goes with sequence 2. I'm going to stick that right there. And now I know that those sequences match up exactly with the audio. And this one probably be a little long on the other end of it. Yeah, see, it's a little long on that end. So once again, if I had another sequence, I'd push it out there and trim that off. So that's essentially how I like. Now at this point, now I could substitute this wave file for the entire sequence, and that would be the whole thing. So that's how I deal with it. So then once it's in my editor, that's where I might add sound effects, or in general, I don't need to edit the animation anymore because I've been doing that when I was creating the animation. And that's pretty typical of even big budget movies. When you stop and think about it, I was reading something about Toy Story. In Toy Story 3, some of those frames that were taking to animate took up to a week for one single frame. Now obviously they have a huge render farm, so they can render multiple frames, but on one machine it could take up to a week to render. So you don't want to render a lot of things that you aren't going to use in your final output. So they very seldom have a lot of outtakes when they're doing animation. And you know, we can follow that best industry practice as well. Okay, so anyway, that's hopefully all the rest of my workflow. Oh, no, I forgot one thing. Oh, gosh, I'm so old. All right, let me show you one more thing. I forgot to show you about the lip quivering and singing because I was doing this specifically for Janet. So, all right, so let me bring up, once again, boy, I tell you, whatever you do, try not to get old. It's although the alternative is not too good either. But anyway, I'm going to bring that up for. Let me open up. Let me open up something here. Try to see what I've got here. Let me show you how I did this. When people sing, and they don't sing like this all the time, but when they sing, watch this guy sing here.
My bride. My bride, I've come to claim my bride. Come tenderly to crush her against my side.
Now, that last part, up until that last note he sang, he was just singing with his mouth open. I mean, you know, most people just sing, they don't. But when you do that, and I'm not a singer, so as my wife would certainly tell you right away, she is a singer, I'm not. But there's a tremolo, or whatever the word. It's when you quaver your voice, you know, whatever that is. Singers do that. As a matter of fact, nowadays, a lot of singers do that artificial on everything they sing. But when you're doing that naturally, and you're doing it, in order to get that effect here, if we look at this, let's zoom in so you can see how we've done it here.
Crush her against my side.
Notice how his mouth opens back and forth. Well, the way I did that is, I'm going to come into Milos and get his mouth so you can see how I did that. Let's see, and he was singing in a neutral position. So, I went to I imported the Papagayo data file as normal. And then when I got to this was simply one phoneme. And I'm going to erase all this so it looks right. So it was simply like this before. See, that's how it normally is. He's trying to get this. So any wonder I use multiple monitors, and so if I'm back here, come on. Okay, but I want his mouth to quaver, and because I want his mouth to quaver, I go up here and I look at this particular keyframe, and if I look at it, I have to bring it. I can see that it is the AI phoneme. Okay, with me so far? There's really only you can't quiver your mouth when it's closed, obviously. So you know, go ahead and try to sing F quivering. You can't do it. Yeah. You can only quiver your mouth when it's open, and really the only open mouth positions are the A-I-E positions and the O-U-W-O positions. So it's like a ooh or it's ah. It's one of the two. That's really the only two positions you can quiver your mouth in. In this particular case, it's an AI phoneme that he's singing. So what I did was I came over to here, just a little bit further in the timeline, not a whole lot, and then I just added in an E phoneme. Okay, That's all I did. No big deal. And then I just duplicated that. So I copied it, and I just pasted it here. And of course, once you start copying and pasting, you can copy and paste a lot quicker because you can do that. I didn't even try to make it scientific. I kind of wanted it to make it so it's, you know, not completely even about things. I wanted it to go. So now as you see, if he goes, so his mouth quavers because his mouth is going back and forth between the A, I, and the E position. If his mouth was in an O position, then I would use, you know, and I have done this in the past. If his mouth was in an O position, then I would use the WQ, which is like that. So O and then WQ, and then his mouth would quaver back and forth between those. I could even throw in a U if I wanted to. Whoops, except that's anything. So, but anyway, the important thing is now you see how I did that wavering, and you don't have to do it for all. As I think as Milos is singing, I think he only wavers his voice about 3 or 4 times total, and it's always the AI phoneme. So it's pretty easy to do that. So that's that one. I think I didn't forget anything else. Hopefully that's all of it. If there's something else that I've left out, if somebody. I'm going to put in the final video for these 2 segments together, not the whole song because I'm not actually done with that, nor do I know whether I'll ever will be done with it. But I had fun doing this part, so hopefully it told you something and gave you some ideas. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask on Animators Forum, and I will be glad to answer as best I can.